Hi, everyone. If you are joining us today for our press conference, welcome again to the latest in our FCCJ briefings on the COVID-19 crisis. I'm sitting here with my fellow chair of the FCCJ Events Committee, Teddy Jimbo, and we are going translatorless, interpretatorless today. We don't have an interpreter. Our speaker will speak in English. Our speaker, we are very honored to have him, is Kisaku Hanzo. He is Deputy Director General and Distinguished Professor of Kyoto University, the Institute for Advanced Study there. Hanzo Sensei won, of course, the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine 2 years ago for his work on cancer. But he was more recently in the news defending himself from a fake news story which was widely circulated on the internet. It even found its way into my inbox on the COVID-19 pandemic. He was forced to strongly refute claims that he once said the coronavirus had been cooked up in a Chinese laboratory. You can still find his defense on the Kyoto University website. This is part of it. This is a time for us, especially those of us devoting our careers to the forefronts of scientific research, to work together to fight this common enemy. We cannot delay one moment in this effort to save the lives of our fellow humans. At this stage, when all our energies are needed to treat the ill and prevent the further spread of sorrow and plan for a new beginning, the broadcasting of unsubstantiated claims regarding the origins of the disease is dangerously distracting. So he will, I'm sure, Professor will, I'm sure, address that issue today. He'll also talk about, of course, the pandemic, as well as the relationship between infectious diseases and cancer and our immune systems. He comes to us today amid growing confidence that Japan may have, we should stress that, the virus under some sort of control, and on the day that the government may decide to lift its state of emergency in 39 of the country's 47 prefectures. So reasonably optimistic, or as optimistic as we've been for some weeks. Just before we begin, let me show you the email address if you want to send a question to, yeah, there it is. If you want to send a question to us for Professor Hanzo, you can do so at any time during the press conference. I'm now going to hand over to the professor. Sensei, よろしくお願いします。
Okay. Hello, everybody. Today, I'd like to briefly introduce what I have done in cancer immunotherapy. And then I'd like to go into the your favorite subject, corona. And I'd like to mention something more general thing. And in the end, I'd like to stress anti-PD-1 blockade therapy used for cancer might be also useful against the corona. So let me start showing my first slide. Okay. これがこっちを映さなきゃ。ここね。Okay, so the title of my talk is Cancer, Infectious Disease, and Our Immune System. The idea to cure the cancer by immune therapy has been proposed for a long time by late Sir Frank McFarlane Burnett, 1970. And he thought immune system is such a very delicate and precise system that they should check when the cancer cell first appeared and eliminate most of those kind of the bud of the cancer tumors. This idea was supported by a number of studies. However, the actual application of this theory took a long time. The why Burnett which this idea is based on the finding that our body, this is the genetic tree of evolution, and we, the human, belong to mammals, are called vertebrate, which has a backbone, and that starts from the jawless fish, lamprey, and those very primitive fish. And those group of the organisms have a immune system called acquired immunity, which can precisely pinpoint slight difference between our self cell and the other cells or bacteria or the mutated cells, that namely cancer. That was his original idea. And fortunately, this system was originally evolved almost accidentally as a defense system against the pathogens. And then the vertebrate live long. And now we face another problem, that is the cancer. And cancer accumulate mutation and become different from ourselves. That we call neoantigen, but that can be recognized by our immune system. And now tumor can be eliminated by the power of immune system. So many people tried, like cancer vaccine, specific protein expressed on the cancer, purified, injected, and made a vaccine, but didn't work. Also, they tried to stimulate T cells, introduce cytokines. All these failure, many decades didn't work. And the reason for that is people didn't know the immune system regulated not only the axle, but also brake. The brake, I want to hear, you have the two types of brake, CTL4 and the PD1. I just make analogy with the car driving. So two types of brake, one is parking brake and the other is driving brake, and paired with ignition and accelerator. Do two different type of brake, the parking and driving, both important at different stage of the immune activation. So all the attempts past decades concentrated how to boost the car. But imagine if you have a very tight brake, car cannot move even you push the axle. That was actually the case for many decades, and people were very much disappointed. What we have done is just simply change the balance of immune power up or down. For example, if you have a brake and release the brake, the car begin to run. And that is the good for the treatment of infectious diseases and cancer, because when your body is watching very carefully, you can eliminate not only pathogens, also cancer cells, which came from our cell, but eventually changed and become different cells. So the idea was actually tried in two different laboratories, one Jim Allison in Texas and our lab in Kyoto, very close, around 19 something. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so on the other hand, immune system has another side. If you push this, you get the hyperimmune system, and that causes the different type of disease we call autoimmune diseases. So to make a long story short, here you're the center blue is the immune cells, and here's the tumor cells, which try to escape the function of killing cells through PD1 brake. And tumor cell has a hand or handle to push the brake. And this is the state of the tumor growing. But if you put the antibody to release this interaction, and then killer cell can reactivate it and can attack the tumor cell. So basically, PD-1 blockade release the brake and rejuvenate the immune power, which had been suppressed by tumor cells. So anti-PD-1 was produced in collaboration with now bought by Bristol Myers Squibb, and this antibody was quickly introduced to the clinical trial first in United States, and 2 years later in Japan. But this took long time because nobody wanted to try very notorious immunotherapy, because many decades immunologists proposed many strategies one after another and all failure. So clinicians didn't believe. So in the end, the patient recruited are all terminal stage, different solid tumor. They had a huge tumor in the body. Surprise came when the paper published 2012, all these terminal stage patients, lung cancer, melanoma, or renal cancer, somehow, so doctors thought these patients were hopeless. So let's try something different. But surprisingly, 20 to 30% patients responded and survived. In addition, more surprise is they stopped the treatment after 2 years, and those which responded, smalling, this is at 0, and tumor size reduced, and they kept the reduced size, not regrow, just in the case of the chemotherapy. Most of the cases, when you stop the treatment, tumor begin to regrow. This didn't happen. And we also did a similar trial in Kyoto University. The cohort number is very small, only 20, but half of them somehow responded, complete response, partial response, or stable disease. This is a sign of a response. And 2 out of 20 patients who completely responded and tumor disappeared, even after now almost over 6 years, they had no sign of tumor and very healthy. And another impressive report came from Europe, and nivolumab and standard chemotherapy blind test 200 each group, and patient didn't know which one they are receiving, and they eventually found very striking difference compared from the chemotherapy, and the ethical committee stopped this blind test. So after all, currently more than dozen tumors, mostly solid tumors, are approved for the treatment of PD-1 blockade. So this is the good sign to start. The cancer can be treated by immunotherapy, but still we have problems. And also advantage. So big advantage is less adverse effects because of the normal cell are not affected. And secondly, in theory, it should be effective to any type of tumors. But so far, leukemia is not the good tumor to be treated by this immunotherapy, but growing number of different type of tumor will be treated. And most importantly, once they showed very good response, it's durable. And you can stop the treatment and still patient can no sign of recurrence. And why it works? It's clear. Here's the a little bit difficult, but you can see many different type of tumors on top, and the y-axis shows a log scale of number of mutations per protein coding region, meaning they change the different protein by this mutation. So it clearly, normal cell has 0 mutation by theory, or in fact, it's true. And most of the tumors, around 1,000 or 10,000 times more mutations compared to the normal cell. So that means most of the tumors are not self. They are something different from our own. Therefore, tumor cell attack. And this is the major lesson we learned from the large-scale cancer genome project. So you can treat a tumor, a drug, chemotherapy, and they cannot completely kill. And some remaining mutants, resistant cells, begin to grow, and they change the drug, but again, same thing happens. But fortunately, immune cell can recognize every single cell as non-self. So therefore, they can attack. That's the big difference between chemotherapy and immune system, immunotherapy. So Andy Colgan in UK published an article in New Scientist 2016 saying this is just beginning of end of cancer. And he actually, Dr. Chen on genetics said, we are at the point equivalent to the penicillin discovery in infectious diseases. The meaning is penicillin revolutionized the treatment of infectious diseases, but it didn't solve everything. Subsequent series of new generation antibiotics finally put human being as a conqueror of infectious diseases. We still have many problems. We need biomarkers to distinguish self-responder versus non-responder. And we certainly need more improvement, increasing accessibility of killer cells to tumor site for protection of potentiation of killer cell function. And currently, well, this is on 2017, now this is even more. Many people now try the combinatorial therapy. They try to combine two break-releasing agents, CTLA4, another break, or combine with chemo or radiotherapy. So many trials going on, and I hope this will eventually become useful. And what I really hope is immunotherapy will gradually grow. I'm not so accurate that exact year, but this is my future, very optimistic view. And what I really hope in the end, we can live with tumor. If we have strong enough immune power, we make a balance. And we don't care if elderly people, age of 90, contain the tumor a size of a few centimeters. That doesn't matter. And we just keep it. No serious or strong invasive treatment. If our immune power is strong, we can coexist as long as tumor will not affect our daily activities. That hopefully will come. So now I'd like to switch the subject to the current problems, the infectious diseases. I put this proposal the end of actually March, and the media asked me to put this on my homepage, and I put it on the April 6th. So what I proposed first is just increase the PCR test. We have to know exactly how many people are infected, who are infected, who are not infected. PCR is the only measure to test. Without knowing where the infectants, we cannot take appropriate strategy to prevent further infection. And I also very much concerned, very heavily packed traffics in big cities, especially Tokyo, and same in Osaka, slightly much less Nagoya and Kyoto. But if you cannot solve this, there is no way to prevent spreading of the corona. And also, we need appropriate medication as soon as possible. We don't have time to make a new drug. Why don't we try everything we already have? There are many drugs used for HIV or influenza or Ebola, whatever. We just try and slowly find a way to treat the patient. The most important thing is to avoid the death. If we can reduce the number of deaths within a reasonable range. Reasonable means range of the flu that is normally 0.1% or so. Then we don't have to be so much fear, and we can behave in a normal condition. So this is the background of my appeal. So we should consider this is a battle, and a battlefield, it's very important where the enemy is located. Otherwise, it's impossible. Therefore, I urged at that point, quickly boost number of tests to at least 10,000 per day. Hopefully, I thought at that time, but even now, PCR number is very limited. And this is the kind of the long war, but we don't wait until the virus goes away. We have to fight against, and we know several strategies, including our immune system, how to fight against. But to fight, we have to know where the enemy is, how big the enemy is. That's my basic thinking. And at that time, turning point, I can clearly see, learning from the European situation, whether we can keep our healthcare system in the healthy condition. In China and European cities, collapse of the total healthcare system is a major problem that is actually disaster. And that is not only disaster for patients, but also social economy itself damaged very much. So we have to think how to avoid this healthcare collapse. So this is the just simple rationale I was thinking. So I put this all together so you can read. And I just said virus is just invisible spy spreading everywhere. We don't know. So only way to find is technology is PCR. And now we have more strategies. This is the same thing repeated, but more elaborate way I explained. So the treatment is very important. If we have a very good, efficient treatment, we don't have to so much afraid of corona. But if we don't have appropriate treatment, it's a very serious diseases. So to protect our healthcare system, number one is we have clear principle of segregation of mild or no symptom infectants from severe patient. We have to have clear segregation. We don't have to put mild patient to the hospital. We can keep them in the hotel. And also, we start investigation or research to generate a vaccine and also the new drugs. But it's not easy. Vaccine normally takes years, and new drug also take years. But we have to start now. So government have to invest, and it may come in 2 years or 3 years, but that's most important to fight. So what we can learn from coronavirus pandemic? I think people should realize the value of science. It's not just simply to produce money. It's protect ourselves and protect our society. And science serves as a foundation to protect human lives, society, and nation. So the government have to recognize the value of science accurately and have to invest more. So later, April 16, I put another second urgent proposal. This is more focusing on the treatment. Treatment is urgent, but I was very much frustrated. Several medicine tried in China and Europe, something we developed. I mean, in this country, like Avigan, they were not quickly approved for the treatment of the COVID-19. And I was a bit frustrated. And also, at the very serious stage, Actemra, which again developed in this country. Why government doesn't recommend to introduce that? But in China and France, they use it and reported it's effective. So I strongly urged we should push this. So I think this line is still very important. The social system to prevent the reinfection, that is certainly important, but same time, we have to try medical new strategy and always have some risk, but we have to try. So this statement is important. Always we have our immune system and help of the medicine. Combined, we say we have conquered infectious diseases in last century. But vaccination is more difficult. We cannot rely only vaccination. As you know, it's very difficult to develop vaccine for this type of virus, which has RNA as a genome that include influenza, HIV, and also this COVID-19. So we cannot rely only on vaccine. We have to have medication and natural immunization in long term. And this is the last slide. When this is 2003 paper, soon after we found anti-PD-1 is useful against the tumor, we also show this is also effective to block infection. This is the model experiments in animals. The blue is adenovirus. Adenovirus is normally what a very common virus causing seasonal cold. And so without any treatment, the this is a liver is completely occupied by adenovirus. But if you have a PD-1 blockade, hyperimmune system, you see very drastic elimination of the virus. So actually our patent include PD-1 blockade covers not only tumor, but also infectious diseases. And I hope this can be used for the treatment. So my last message is 20th century, we succeeded eradication of infectious disease by vaccination and antibiotics. And hopefully this century, somehow we improve immunotherapy and hope we can say we conquered cancer. So thank you very much for your attention. I finished 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hanzo. Just before we start taking questions, let me again flash the address for questions. There it is. I'm holding it up, and I think it's on the screen as well. That's the email address if you want to send questions. You will have to be quick because we have quite a few lined up. Just quickly, one from me. Sensei, you did have a slide which said leaders who refuse to face scientific facts and delay to take measures
Yes.
from fear of economic loss.
Yeah.
And you do cite 3 countries there, Great Britain, the United States, and Italy. You may have tactfully kept that slide off the screen. Presumably then you're not happy with the way that the United States and Britain are tackling this crisis.
Well, actually, I should include Japan as well.
Ah, okay.
But at that time, the very strong infectious spreading was UK, and but this is the almost all leaders, I should say, except the female leaders. Female leaders have done very well. I'm very much impressed.
Interesting. Girl power. Okay, well, we will take some questions. Teddy is going to line them up here. Have you got anybody lined up, Teddy, or will we go to online questions?
Yeah, let's go to online now.
All right. Well, the first question comes from this. Yeah, so we take an online one?
Yeah, just
okay.
take online first.
All right, this is from Pauline Reich of Thomson Reuters. Can you explain how Japan is tracing people infected with coronavirus or carriers of the virus, as it is done using technology like Bluetooth or GPS, or are there privacy issues? Would you be able to comment on that, Professor?
Well, I cannot comment the government policy, but as far as I know, government is not willing to introduce the privacy infringing technology. Japanese people are very sensitive to this, and actually, without this kind of the tracing system, so far, the number of the infectants reducing, and at least how do we call? I call this is the second wave in Japan is coming down. Well, we may expect another wave, but so far, this is still mystery to most of the medical field scientists why Japan, with such a very relatively loose, legally loose, I should say, a system, and quite remarkably less number of deaths and infectants. So I don't see any near future introduction of this tracing technology. And the only way to trace is the increased number of PCR, antigen screening, and later antibody screening.
Right. You said you support increasing to 10,000 tests a day. We're not close to that figure yet, are we?
No, not at all.
All right. The next question is from Motoko Rich of the New York Times. Motoko, over to you.
Hi.
Hello,
Professor Hanzo. Thank you so much for being with us today. I wanted to follow up on the testing question. I mean, as you point out, Japan is sort of confounding medical professionals and scientists around the world as to what exactly has been the sort of formula that Japan has successfully seemed to flatten the curve, and also perhaps more importantly, because we don't know exactly, like you said, how many cases there are. So it seems like what Japan has definitely been successful at is suppressing a number of deaths. So I wondered if you had your own theory as to why Japan is successful, but also if you still support this increase in PCR testing, given how evidently successful Japan has already been without massive testing.
Okay, so this is a mystery to almost everybody. There are several theories. The one is people in this country are generally very clean. They like to be clean. They wash hands very frequently in normal days, and they don't kiss, they don't hug. And also, there's a more scientific hypothesis that includes BCG vaccination will help boosting up the basic level of immunity. And another theory is these are more scientific, but HLA haplotype, that is very important for recognition of antigen or pathogen by immune system. And this has enormous difference between Caucasian and Asians. So there are many theories, but we have to wait years to really what is the major cause, or everything is combined. But the next question you say, we so far apparently the number is reducing and apparently successful without huge PCR examination. But we have to think the second or third wave should come. So we have to prepare. So I think it's very important to introduce the high-scale PCR testing from anywhere and as quickly as possible to trace those infectants. So I strongly think the increase of testing could be antigen testing if it's sensitive enough, but normally it's not that sensitive compared to PCR. Yes, I still push to increase the testing.
But how would that, sorry to follow up, but how would that change the strategy, do you think? That if they increase testing, what would they do with that information?
If we increase and locate where the infected people is found, we can quickly isolate them to the hotel or somewhere, not necessarily the hospital. Normally those who are not having any serious symptoms, they can be watched by isolation. And that prevents the spreading of the virus.
All right, thank you so much. Motoko, sorry to cut in, we have other people waiting. This next question is from Nakano Hirofumi, and he's a freelance reporter. Nakano-san, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hanzo. I have one question. You told us how to fight against COVID-19. What about infodemics like fake news? If you can tell us something based on your experience, I'll be happy to listen. Thank you.
Well, fake news, I realized I have many students all over the world, and they just sent the first message. There are some strange fake news circulating, and that's the first monitoring to me, and then followed by a large number of email asking whether this is true or not. And at the beginning, my secretary tried to respond, but they found it's impossible. So we talked with the university, and the university decided to put the statement at the home page. So, this is very sad and unfortunate, but unfortunately, we cannot prevent only way is what I did is, I think, one of the best way. I cannot, I don't want to spend my energy for this type of things, but it's very sad. And but this is the our life. What can I
And you've
do?
Sensei, you've no theories on where that theory or where that fake news story originated from?
Fake news originated from India. That I know.
From India.
India.
Yeah, because
Hindu, right?
the first language was Hindu and English.
Right. So, right. I mean, you don't know if it was political in nature. You know, there are some people who would like, of course, to blame China for all this. You've no idea.
I have no idea.
All right. Thank you. The next question is from Ilgin Yolmaz, and she is with BBC World Turkish. Ilgin, over to you.
Hi, hello, Professor. Thank you very much for this speech today. I want to go back to the antigen test because the antigen test was approved by the Japanese government, I believe, just yesterday, which can actually take just 15 minutes, like the flu test, and they can manufacture 200,000 units per week. So I just want to clarify your position. Are you happy with this kind of test to be used at least perhaps as a screening test in future, if not the definitive PCR test? Thank you.
Well, the problem with antigen test is it's very insensitive compared to PCR. So we have to introduce both PCR and antigen test. Antigen test is convenient, quick, and probably less dangerous. But PCR we also need. And ideally, PCR is like South Korea, should be complete automated. And I heard the machine was developed by Japanese company. So why Japanese government don't introduce this? I'm a bit puzzled.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Are you happy with that answer?
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. The next question then is from Patrick Welter, and he is with the German agency FAZ, F-A-Z. Well, Patrick, onegaishimasu.
Thank you, Professor Hanzo. I have two questions, if I may. The first question is, you propose or you demand that the Japanese government does more PCR tests. What else do you think that Japan should do different in fighting the virus? And do you think it's adequate to lift the state of emergency or the soft lockdown in Japan at this time? And my second question is, you mentioned these technological dimension, and you wondered that the Japanese people is not willing to accept privacy violations with any tracing apps. Do you think that has to change to continuously fight the virus, looking at second or third or fourth waves that might come?
Well, the government should be careful to remove the regulation. They shouldn't lift everything at once. They should go slowly. I'm very much concerned about this, the Tokyo jam-packed train. This is very dangerous, especially going to summer. Train needs some air conditioning, and that's very bad. So we need kind of the working at home system more widely and introduced, and that's actually very good. I don't think the heavy concentration in Tokyo, just like in New York, is not good for the country's economy and more spread. You can work in Nagano or whatever, and that's more healthy for workers. And so the point is, the government should introduce gradual and more social changing measure to expect or to fight the coming second or third wave pandemic. The second question, privacy violating the IT technology, I'm personally not happy about it. We can make the pandemic stop by introducing the Medicare medicine. I'm pretty sure we can overcome the pandemic by medication, and after a few years, gradually, the majority of people get immunity. And so the point is, if we can avoid the death, we don't have to be so much afraid of these COVID-19.
Thank you. So presumably, Professor, you think it's too early to lift the lockdown?
Well, lockdown lift, I'm fine, but you know, we have to go slowly, and we always have to prepare for the second wave coming. It's almost inevitable. So it's not just all or none. It's a gradual and with clear safety measure.
Got it. Thank you. The next question is from Rick Weisbird, and he is with a publisher called ELS, E-L-S-S. I hope I got that right. Richard?
Yes. Honjo Sensei, thank you very much for being with us today. Could you please tell us about clinical trials that are underway in Japan to treat COVID-19?
Well, probably you already know. I know their Avigan trial, and also this Actemra trial. And I heard there are another medicine used for HIV by combination. So I'm not completely screening this trial, but there are many trials. And also, in case of HIV, first, this is RNA virus, which mutate very frequently and change. The virus genotype is different between China, Europe, and Japan. So they were changing. So don't rely on single medicine. The combination. In case of HIV, it turned out the triple combination is the best treatment. And I believe similar thing happens for this COVID-19 as well.
From Simon Denyer, he's with the Washington Post. Simon?
Thanks, Honjo Sensei, thank you very much. Wanted to ask you to return to a comment you made earlier about the haplotype big difference between Asians and Caucasians. If you could say a little bit more about that,
okay,
and whether you think that's a possible reason that death tolls have been much lower in Asia than they have been in Western Europe and the United States, or whether you think we should look for other reasons such as mutations of the virus, or just you from your experience, is the genetic difference a credible possible theory that needs to be tested and investigated further?
Yes, I think this theory is being tested by many scientists all over the world. And if this HLA is the molecule which present antigen coming from the virus to the T cell immune cell that attack the virus infected cell and eliminate the virus. So this is a basic principle of recognizing the enemy. And the HLA has an enormous polymorphism, meaning a difference among individual and controlled by genetics. So always when we discuss about the immune reaction, we cannot avoid this idea. And that has to be tested. And it's easily testable. And I'm pretty sure I know the group in Rockefeller and several others heavily working on this. So we'll know the answer sooner or later. So that could be one of the reasons, but I don't think that's the only reason. There may be several other possibilities.
Simon, are you okay?
Great. That's great. Thank you. Yes.
All right. Anthony Rowley is with the South China Morning Post. Anthony, I have your question on paper, but would you like to ask it in person? Go ahead, Anthony.
Hi.
Yeah, you're on.
Yes.
Anthony, you're on.
Cannot hear. Cannot hear.
We cannot hear. Anthony, I'll ask the question. All right. This is Anthony's question. How important is it to strengthen one's immune system as a counter to the countervirus? And what are the most effective ways to do this? What natural or manufactured products are available to help the process? That's
Okay.
two questions, actually.
So that's the interesting question. And, you know, there are tons of the supplements claiming the boost the immune system. And this is the very important commercial products in all over the world. But by experience, many people say, you know, in Japan, natto, you know, the soybean fermented, or miso, and those, and probably cheese, those are good as a food. And of course, immune system always very important. So they need energy and rest, exercise. So simply that healthy life is important to maintain your immune system.
I was just in the middle of something. Did you say cheese was good?
Yeah, cheese is good. Fermented product is in general good.
Wow, that's good news for all of us, for all of us cheese lovers.
Yeah.
All right, the next question is, sorry to go so quickly, but we have limited time. The next question is from Ariel Busetto, and she is with the Japanese publication Japan Forward. Ariel, do you have your question?
Yeah. So thank you, Honjo Sensei, for being with us today. I wanted to ask you, first of all, for the fact that they're going to probably release from the lockdown in 39 prefectures today. The WHO is saying that before countries should be releasing from lockdown, there should be a systemized antibody test to figure out where the infection has been, something that you have also advocated for. Do you think that there should be some measures such as more extended antibody testing at this point in time before lifting the lockdown, and if anything else as well? And the second thing that I wanted to ask was about the BCG shot that you mentioned before. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about that hypothesis, and if there are any other hypotheses that you thought that were particularly maybe convincing or that caught your attention in explaining why there is such a low death toll right now in Japan.
Okay, the first question is whether we should introduce or boost antibody test before the release of the lockdown. Well, I don't think so. It's not the absolute precondition for the release, but it's very important. So antibody test is to trace the person who ever experienced infection with or without symptom, and that normally develop the antibody. And this antibody test is very simple and normally very sensitive. And that tells how many people are actually infected with or without symptom. And if the number of the infected experience become very high, the society become as a whole relatively immune. So that's a very important measure to predict the second or third wave. So I think this is a very important measure, but at this moment, I don't expect the antibody carrying person is more than 10% or that level. So it's still way below from the natural, so-called natural immunity of the society. So the second question about the BCG. this has been proposed by a number of the Australian scientists actually trying to test this. So BCZ, there are two strains. One is a Denmark strain used in some part of the Europe, Eastern Europe or Portugal or somewhere. But most of the European countries and the United States abolished the BCZ for a long time ago, including Australia. But Japan has its own strain called Corynebacterium tuberculosis Tokyo, and this is a unique strain and used to provide it to South Korea. So South Korea stopped last 10 or 20 years. So younger generation don't have, but elderly all have. So the theory is BCZ is a kind of the dead bug. So this causes very strong immunization. So generally, we have, in addition to acquired immunity, also innate immunity is strongly boosted. So the theory is, by this immunization, basal level of immunity of those inoculants boosted. So that helps the fight against the COVID-19. But again, this is the theory. It's possible, but we have to trace and actually Australian scientists proposed this, I think, the first time, and actually testing by immunization.
Thank you, Professor. I think our last question will be from Kudo Hiroshi. He is with JCAST. Kudo-san, are you there? Kudo-san, we can't hear you. You're on mute. 聞こえません。
ミュート解除されているので、こちらミュート解除されているので、そちらの方から音が出てないんじゃないかな。
今聞こえましたよ。
聞こえました？
聞こえない。
いや、聞こえないですよ。
聞こえない。
じゃあすいません。工藤さん、ちょっと直していただけますか？その前にもう一つの質問ありますので。
ちょっと直しておいてください。ちょっと別の質問じゃその間いきます。はい。
This question is from Karen Nishimura of Liberation Radio France. Some studies in Japan suggest that the early spread of two types of SARS-CoV-2 named S and K may have given a kind of herd immunity on to parts of or some Japanese people against the more severe type G, which is responsible for many deaths in Europe and the USA. Do you give any credibility to that theory at all?
Well, I know that's kind of theory, and the first wave directly came from China. Second wave came from Europe. That's the theory. But again, I think this is testable, and there are many samples stock, and if people trace all the virus sequence, that's easily testable. But again, the question is how different in their infectious activity or this severity causing this particular mutation is responsible. That's a little bit difficult to test, and we have to see more data from all over the world. Is there any clear association of the mutation and disease phenotype among many different countries?
Thank you so much. Kudo-san, one more try. Kudo-san,
let's try it.
もう一回やってみましょうか。聞こえますか？
Kudo-san、どうぞ。今、ミュート解除されてます。喋ってみてください。ダメかな？
No. ダメ。やっぱり。
So,
this will be the final question, and we are contractually obliged to ask you the same question, all our speakers the same question. Professor, if you don't mind, do you think the Olympics will go ahead next year?
Oh, that's very political question. I can say my very personal as a medical scientist view. The only condition is whether we have vaccination or vaccine, useful vaccine at that point. Because to bring all these people all over the world, everybody in the world must be cleared the infection of the certain virus. Okay, so I don't think that is very difficult unless we have a very good vaccine at that point.
So you're saying, Professor, the vaccine has to be developed by then and has to be made available to everyone in the world in order for the Olympics.
At least those visitors, they have to have a shot. Yeah. Otherwise, just starting from the beginning, because hundreds nations coming together and interacting with each other. So it's just another chaos starting again.
Well, the visitors, but also we Japanese are receiving people.
Yes,
on this
exactly.
End. So,
yeah.
So we have to. So it has to be made available to every single Japanese. Would you say?
I think so. Well, at least they have to show majority of people has antibody.
Thank you.
Professor, we'll read out your full title again for the benefit of people listening. Professor Kisaku Hanzo, Deputy Director General and Distinguished Professor at Kyoto University and winner of the 2018 Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine. Thank you so much for coming today, for giving your time, for being so clear and rational. It's the only thing really, or one of the very few things that will help us combat the virus. So we really appreciate your insights and your time today. It's very generous of you to do so. And maybe you'll come back when we are living in happier times.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
じゃあ中継終了してください。